Welcome back to my channel. I'm happy to see you again. Here is my second part for the review for the first episode of the third season, House of the Dragon. This is my first part of the review where we talked about Alicent Hightower, her sons, Ulf, Hugh and Adam. Now let's continue. Please subscribe and give me thumbs up, and to this kitten too. Now let's turn to the Black Queen herself. Rhaenyra is carrying an enormous burden. She has already lost one son. Naturally, she is terrified of losing another. That's why she is unwilling to send Jace into danger. But she also carries a wound that has followed her since season 1. One central theme that has defined her entire character arc: authority, more specifically the struggle to be recognized as a legitimate leader because she is a woman. That has always been her greatest battle. Viserys named her heir. Their lords swore their oath. Everything should have been settled. But reality turned out very differently. Even Viserys sometimes treated her as though she belonged to the sidelines rather than the center of the power. Again and again, Rhaenyra has been forced to fight for legitimacy, to prove herself, to demand recognition. Last season, people questioned her authority. Some considered betraying her. Only Daemon ultimately remained loyal. And now the same problem returns. Once again, she believes Alicent. Once again, she sees a chance to end the war. Take King's Landing, remove the rival king, finish the conflict. She doesn't want endless bloodshed. She doesn't want more children to die. What makes this even more tragic is that she has no idea she is about to lose another son. And Jace can't understand her reasoning. To him, trusting Alicent seems absurd, dangerously naive. And then suddenly another crisis emerges. A battle is unfolding. Reinforcements are needed. Rhaenyra immediately wants to go herself. And that's when everything changes. Rhaenyra wants to fly into the battle herself, but Jace sees things very differently. He is terrified that she is about to make a catastrophic mistake. In his eyes, she is allowing emotion to cloud her judgment. He is grieving, she is desperate for the war to end, and because of that, he believes he can't see the danger clearly. So Jace makes a choice that from his perspective is absolutely necessary. He decides that the Black Queen cannot be allowed to risk herself. Not now, not under these circumstances. He believes that someone has to stop her, even if that someone is her own son. So he gives the order. Rhaenyra is locked away, and while she is being restrained, James climbs into his dragons towards the battle himself. It's a brave decision, a noble one, and yet it's also the beginning of the tragedy. Because now we have two people acting out of love for each other while simultaneously hurting each other. And that brings us to one of the most powerful seasons in the episode, the dress. The meaning of the dress scene. Some viewers may not have fully understood what was happening when Rhaenyra began tearing it apart, but the moment carries enormous symbolic weight. Think about what has just happened. Rhaenyra spends her entire life fighting to be recognized as a ruler, not as a daughter, not as a wife, not as a mother, as a ruler, a leader. Someone whose authority should be respected. And now, in the moment when she believes her judgment matters most, her own son refuses to follow her. He doesn't merely disagree with her, he actively overrules her. He takes command away from her. Even worse, the people around him obey. The man carrying out Jace's orders understands that he could die for doing so. Yet he still follows Jace instead of Rhaenyra. Think about what it means from her perspective. Her authority is being rejected. Not by enemies, not by rivals, by her own side, by her own family, and that's why the scene with the dress matters so much. When she tears it apart, she is doing more than destroying a piece of clothing. She is symbolically cutting away the role that has been imposed on her. The role of the woman who must constantly justify herself, the woman whose authority is always conditional. The woman people think they can overrule for her own good. She's rejecting that identity. She is saying, enough! From now on, there will be a ruler sitting on the throne, a ruler who expects to be obeyed, a ruler whose decisions carry weight. And no, this isn't just my interpretation. It's that behind-the-scenes interview I mentioned earlier, the actress herself discussed this exact moment. She explained that Rhaenyra is consciously sharing that feminine archetype. The version of herself that has been trapped by the expectations. The dress represents that identity. Destroying it represents leaving it behind. And what's heartbreaking is that this transformation is only beginning, because very soon she is going to learn that Jace is dead. The son she was trying to protect is gone. So imagine her perspective. Imagine the cruelty of it. She tries to keep him safe. He refuses. He believes he is saving her. In doing so, he sacrifices himself. That's the tragedy. Both of them are acting out of love. Both of them believe they are doing the right thing. And yet the result is still disaster. That's often how the most painful conflicts happen. Nobody is trying to hurt one another. Everybody has understandable motivation. Everybody believes they are right. And yet the collusion still destroys lives. Now, before we continue, let's briefly switch perspective and look at Jace's side of the story, because his reasoning is actually very solid. Was Jace right? From his point of view, trusting Alicent is madness, an obvious trap. He genuinely believes his mother is making reckless decisions. He sees the battle of the Gullet the same way. To him, it looks like another attempt to lure Rhaenyra into danger, another attempt to eliminate the Black Queen. And without Rhaenyra, everything falls apart. She isn't just his mother, she is the symbol holding their entire faction together. The lords following her aren't necessarily loyal to Daemon. They are loyal to Rhaenyra. Think back to the Starks. Think about the allies who joined the cause. They pledged themselves to the Black Queen, not anyone else. If she dies, those alliances could collapse overnight. The war could be lost immediately, so when Jace acts, he is not acting purely out of emotion. He is thinking strategically as well. From his perspective, protecting Rhaenyra protects everything, the entire cause, the entire war effort. That's why he seeks support from Baela. And Baela, arguably one of the most level-headed young characters in the story, understands the situation immediately. She sees the impossible choice in front of her. Stay behind and let Jace face his danger alone, or stand beside him, and she chooses to support him. As events unfold, we can see just how dangerous the situation truly was. The risks were enormous. Based on everything we witnessed, there's a very real chance Rhaenyra might not have survived this battle. Jace may very well have saved her life. But if that's true, then we have to ask the obvious question. Was the price worth it? Because the cost was his own life. And for a mother who had already lost one son, the wound is almost unimaginable. The first loss shattered her heart. The second may break it completely. And the consequences of that grief are only beginning. But the showrunners made an interesting choice here. One, the difference from how many viewers might have expected the story to unfold. Jace's death isn't presented as a random tragedy. Rhaena finally claims a dragon. It's connected directly to another young woman, Rhaena. And that's important because for almost the entirety of the last season, Rhaena's story involved around one thing: finding a dragon, claiming a dragon, proving herself, and now she finally succeeds. At least Sheepstealer responds to her. At last, there is a connection. Pay close attention to how the show presents this dragon. He is completely different from the others, even visually. The enlarged lower jaw, the rough appearance, the behavior, everything about him screams one thing: wild. This isn't a dragon raised alongside people. This isn't a dragon that grew up taking commands. This is a creature that survived on his own. And truly wild animals behave differently. They are more unpredictable, more aggressive. Even small wild animals react differently than domesticated ones. And now imagine that on the scale of a dragon. Claiming a dragon is one thing. Getting a dragon to accept you is another. But Teaching a dragon to trust you, understand you, and obey you. This is a completely different process, and that process takes time, a lot of time. The episode goes out of its way to show this. At first, Rhaena herself doesn't even understand what is happening. Has Sheepstealer accepted her? Has he rejected her? When he throws her off and flies away, she has no idea. Then he returns carrying food, as if he is saying, "Fine, you are with me now, let's eat." It's his version of acceptance, his version of friendship, but it's a primitive, almost prehistoric, like a creature that has never learned how to communicate with humans, and yet Rhaena mistakes this first step for complete control. That's a crucial mistake. So she flies toward Dragonstone. Let's ignore for a moment the fact that realistically she should have fallen off during her first ride. That one of those dramatic liberties most fantasy stories take. I can live with that. The real issue comes afterward. Because she spots the battle and unfortunately she decides to get involved. Honestly, it would have been better if she hadn't seen it. The danger of a wild dragon. It would have been better if she stayed behind sharing roasted sheep with Sheepstealer. Because Rhaena is still inexperienced. She's young, she doesn't fully understand the situation. And most importantly, she doesn't yet understand the dragon beneath her. She believes she has control. She doesn't, at least not yet. So she charges into battle trying to help her side, and instead everything goes wrong. Because Sheepstealer is still a wild animal. He doesn't understand military strategy. He doesn't understand friend from foe. He doesn't understand formations or commands. Then comes a critical moment. Before he completely loses control, he's burned. The show makes sure we see it. That injury may be the trigger, the moment that pushes him off the edge. After that, chaos erupts. He attacks indiscriminately. He ignores Rhaena's command. He becomes uncontrollable. At one point, he's even pushing his sister. And if not Jace, the situation could have ended in another death. Jace manages to redirect the danger. He saves others, but in doing so, he places himself directly in harm's way. The death of Jace. And that's what immediately kills him. The showrunners also make his death completely unambitious. They go out of their way to remove any possibility of doubt. The arrows strike his throat. We see exactly what happens. This isn't one of those deaths where viewers spend weeks arguing about whether the character survived. This isn't another maybe he drowned situation. The message is crystal clear. Jace is dead. No mystery, no escape. And that's what makes the tragedy even harsher. Because Rhaena never intended to cause harm. She was trying to help. She was trying to do the right thing. She was trying to prove herself. But her unimpatience ends up creating disaster. She gains a dragon before she is truly ready for the responsibility that comes with one. And that idea actually mirrors something we see in real life all the time. Think about adolescents. Think about growing up. Young people often want to do what adults do. They want independence, responsibility, freedom. They want to prove they are ready. But experience can't be skipped. Skills can't be rushed. And when someone takes on responsibility before they are prepared for it, the consequences can be devastating. That's exactly what happens here. Rhaena isn't malicious, she isn't foolish, she's simply inexperienced. And unfortunately, in war, inexperience can't be just as dangerous as an incompetence. So when we ask whether Jace made the right choice, the answer becomes complicated. Did he save the Black Queen? Probably. Based on what we saw, there is a strong chance Rhaenyra won't not have survived this battle. Jace may have preserved the future of his faction. But what was the cost? The cost was enormous. A mother who had already buried one son is now forced to bury another. And unlike political losses or military defeats, this is a kind of wound that changed a person forever. That's what we are about to witness. Not simply grief, transformation, the consequences of a heart that has finally been broken beyond repair. The emotional core of the episode is beautifully executed, especially because it continues one of the central themes that has defined House of the Dragon from the very beginning: the relationships between parents and children. If you really think about it, most even major conflict in this story can be traced back to that theme. Parents who failed their children, children desperate for love, families unable to communicate, generational wounds passed from one person to another, and we see the theme again in the storyline involving Corlys and his bastard son, Alyn. Corlys and Alyn. This is a very different father and son story than the one we just discussed, but it's built on the same emotional foundation. For the first time, Corlys is genuinely trying. He's making an effort to reach out, to connect, to acknowledge the pain that has existed between them for years. And perhaps most unimportantly, he's finally willing to admit that he has regrets. Alyn, in turn, finally speaks openly about his own wound. Not money, no status, no power, recognition. That what he wanted to be acknowledged. He wanted his father to see him, to claim him, to say, "You're my son." That's the absence that shaped his entire life. And what's fascinating is how much Corlys has changed. The old Corlys never would have had this conversation. The actor himself even hinted at it. Years ago, Corlys would never have sat down and spoken this openly about emotions. Never. But this is no longer the ambitious sea lord chasing glory. This is a man who has suffered, a man who has buried children, a man who understands loss, a man who has watched people he loved disappear. Pain changes people, sometimes in softens them. In Corlys' case, it seems to have done both. He has become wiser. More reflective, more aware of what truly matters. And suddenly, there is sons. The sons he once kept at a distance have become some of the most important people in his life. That's why he is able to have this conversation now. And what does Alyn receive in return? The very thing he has been missing his entire life. A father, not just biologically, emotionally. For the first time, he is beginning to feel what it's like to actually have one. And this matters because it completely changes how he will interpret future events. Later, when Corlys faces Sharako Lochar and the Triarchy, there comes a moment when it appears that Corlys may have died. He disappears beneath the water in full armor, and for a brief moment everyone believes he is gone. Alyn's reaction in that scene isn't simply loyalty to a commander, it isn't loyalty to a lord. It's a reaction of someone who has only just found a father and suddenly believes he has lost him again. That's why he attacks with such fury. That's why he fights so desperately. That's why the emotion feels so raw. The scene isn't really about military strategy, it's about grief, about finally finding something you wanted your entire life and then having it ripped away. The fall of the Lannisters. Now let's shift our attention to Sharako Lochar. And honestly, this episode doesn't make the Lannister twins. The Lannister twins look practically impressive. One loses his head, literally. The Stark delivers it to Daemon. The other believes he is playing some kind of sophisticated political game. He thinks he is manipulating a dangerous woman who commands enormous authority. The problem is he completely misreads the situation. A truly skilled manipulator would have adapted immediately. Someone like Larys Strong would have. Alicent would have. Otto Hightower certainly. They would have read the room, recognized the shift, and adjusted their strategy instantly. Larys actually demonstrates this skill earlier in the episode. The moment he realizes Aegon is about to lose his head, he pivots immediately. He changes the game. He finds a way to keep them alive. That's what intelligent political players do. They adapt. The Lannister, however, doesn't. He keeps pushing the same strategy long after it has become obvious that it's failing. He doesn't understand the person standing in front of him. He fails to recognize that Lochar isn't motivated by politics. She's motivated by obsession, by revenge. And those are very different things. Once he realizes she can't be controlled, he should immediately switch tactics. He should start playing her game. But he doesn't. He keeps insisting on his own, and because of that he becomes expectable. The moment she needs to lighten the ship so it can pass through the narrow channel, she throws him overboard without hesitation. And that's the end of him. Not because he lacked courage, not because he lacked ambition, because he failed to read the situation. The episode uses him to illustrate something important about revenge. When revenge becomes someone's entire identity, reason stops mattering, logic stops mattering. Even self-preservation can stop mattering. People become willing to sacrifice everything for the chance to settle a score. Their allies, their goals, sometimes even themselves. And that's exactly the energy driving Lothar there. She isn't thinking strategically anymore. She's thinking emotionally. She needs revenge. Everything else comes second. And that's what makes her so dangerous. The Battle of the Gullet explained. Speaking of the Battle of the Gullet, it's worth briefly explaining the strategic importance of what we're seeing here. If you look at the map, you'll understand why this location matters so much. The Gullet is especially the gateway through which supplies reach King's Landing. As long as Corlys controls those waters, the capital remains vulnerable. Trade suffers, resources become scarce. The Greens are effectively being strangled. That's why opening the Gullet is such a critical check. It's not simply another naval battle. It's fight for survival. It's fight over supply lines, a fight over who controls the flow of resources. But here's the irony. The weapon the Greens choose to solve this problem was ultimately driven by personal motivation rather than strategic ones. People were pushing their own agendas, their own grudges, their own ambitions. And because of that, the outcome becomes messy. When the battle ends, it's difficult to declare a clear winner. On paper, the blacks may have gained the advantage. But at what cost? Jace is dead. The Black Queen has lost another son. Can you really call that a victory? As for Corlys, the episode deliberately leaves his fate uncertain. We don't actually see him die, and in television that's usually important. If showrunners wanted us to know for certain that he was dead, they would have shown it. Instead, they leave the door open. Based on what we've seen, my assumption is that Corlys survived and that we'll see him again in the next episode. But we'll have to wait and find out. Why this feels like the real Season 3 final? Now let's talk about the episode itself. I've seen many people jokingly refer to the premiere as the real final of the season 2. And honestly, they're not entirely wrong. From a storytelling perspective, this episode feels like the ending that season 2 was building toward. Think about the symmetry. Season 1 ends with the death of one of Rhaenyra's sons. This episode ends with the death of another. Structurally, that mirrors the emotional trajectory of the story almost perfectly. In many ways, it feels like the conclusion we were supposed to get earlier, the final piece of the previous chapter. Only now it's serving as the opening chapter of the new one. And because of that, the episode carries an enormous amount of dramatic weight. It doesn't feel like a show reset. It feels like a continuation, like the story never stopped moving. And honestly, considering how massive and ambitious this episode is, it's hard to complain. That's a powerful start, a confident start, a brutal start, and judging by where things are heading, the story is only going to become darker from here. The stakes are rising, the losses are becoming more personal, and the emotional consequences are finally beginning to catch up with everyone involved. So, Dragon Army, we're just getting started. The engines are warming up, the war is accelerating, and now I have a feeling that episodes ahead are going to hit even harder. As for the first episode of the season 3, what a way to begin. Thanks for watching, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And as always, I'll see you in the next my review. See you next time. Bye.